Good evening. Welcome to ExPat InSights. I'm your host, Raju Mandhyan. Here at ExPat InSights, we take external views of internal successes by foreigners and expats who have made Philippines their homes. And sometimes we invite very creative Filipinos who have done something outside the box. Today, we have two guests today who will be talking about writing and expressing fiction in many forms, in the graphic form and on stage. One of our first guests is a writer, an artist, and also an ad and a media person, son of the famous Jaime Fabregas, Mr. Paulo Fabregas, the author of Filipinos Heroes League, a comic book, a graphic novel, and first of its kind today. So, Paulo, welcome to ExPat InSights.
Thank you very much for having me here, Raju. Thank you.
So, Paulo, before we talk about the book and before your profession, give us a little background about yourself. How did you come to become a graphic artist? Yeah.
Well, I think drawing was my very first love. I can remember drawing since I was around 2 or 3, and I've been drawing all my life.
Yeah.
And I really, especially the comic books and the superheroes, and especially those things really influenced me, and I really loved it from the get-go. And then later on, my love for stories and fiction kicked in, maybe around in my teens. And so that's when I started reading a lot of books, and I started reading a lot of stories, and I even took up English literature in college.
Just so that you could attend to your passion?
No, it's not so that I could attend to my passion, it's just that's what I happen to be passionate about.
Yeah, okay.
So when I graduated college, I had no idea what the heck I'd be doing with what you do with an English lit, with a major in English.
You become a writer, you become a news reporter, or...
I was very close to becoming a teacher.
Oh, that's good, that's good. That would have been good too.
Yeah.
So of all the comics that you've read and all the comics that exist across the world for the last so many decades, you know, what impresses you most? What was, if you were to pick one comic book, character, or graphic novel, which one would that be?
There were 2 pieces of work that really influenced me growing up, and I read them and reread them and reread them again. One was Alan Moore's Watchmen. Watchmen, yeah. It was recently been turned into a movie a couple of years back.
I remember the movie. I don't remember the comic book.
Well, it was first a comic book. The movie not so good. But the comic book was really revolutionary at the time.
American?
No, he's an English writer. But yeah, it's an American published comic.
Yeah,
American published comic book. And that was the first comic book that tried to put superheroes in a real world context. It was the first time that really started taking superheroes and said, what if they really existed in the world? And
really?
It was the first time...
How?
Well, at that point in time, you just had, basically, you had Superman, and finally you had Batman, and you had all of these other... During 1986.
Was their world unreal?
It was really unreal. It was spectacular. Really unreal, It was mostly bad guys.
Kryptonite and Batcave and stuff, yeah.
And it was supervillains versus superheroes. And it didn't really take a good look at superheroes in a real world context. So that was what I really loved that comic book, and I thought it was incredibly revolutionary, and it was.
Yeah.
It's still considered perhaps the best graphic novel ever written.
Yeah.
So there was that. It's actually a lot of people got influenced by that. So then the other one was Batman: The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. Yeah. This has not been turned into a movie yet because it's a bit hard. It's a different kind of Batman story.
But it's in graphic form, though.
It's also in graphic book.
Okay.
It's also a graphic form. Yeah. They call it graphic novels, but it's still a comic book.
Yeah.
What I really liked about that was that it put a new spin on Batman. Batman in that story had retired for 10 years.
Right.
And came back as a 50-year-old man.
Angry.
Well, angry, retired, and he's out of shape, but he still was doing Batman stuff. There was something about that story that really...
I missed that. I want to get a hold of it.
It's worthwhile read, worthwhile read.
So, the progress of your profession from being a reader, being passionate about comics and literature, and you have today reached here.
Yeah.
How did the journey take place? What is the journey? I mean, how do you get to being here? Paulo, by the way, is an author and the graphic artist for this book called Filipinos Heroes League,
League, yeah.
and it's out in the stores, and it's been out for a few months now. So he'll talk about that. So tell me, how did you reach here, Paulo?
I think it was my discipline. After college, I got into advertising, and I think it was my discipline in advertising that helped me achieve this. Because in advertising, it was a great venue because every day you had to learn and talk about you had to talk about ideas every day, and what you had to do was really formulate your idea strongly before you could even write
Put
anything.
it on paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it taught you that discipline.
Yeah.
And that, for me, was vital in coming up with this.
And how long did you brew this in your mind that one day I'm going to come up with my own comic book or my own graphic novel? How long was it cooking up inside of you?
To be honest with you, I had forgotten about graphic novel writing for a long, long time. And then my art director partner in advertising, because in advertising you work in teams. There's a writer and an art director. He saw me doodle. We were brainstorming for some product, and we were doodling. I doodled a Batman, and then he looked at it and he goes like, "Oh my God, you can really draw!" And I'm like, "I can draw a little."
Yeah.
And he was into comic books, and so he said, "Why don't you write your own comic book?" And I
Right.
said, "Okay." And so
right.
it was through his encouragement that I rediscovered my love for comic books, and ever since then. When he gave me that direction to say, why don't you write your own comic book? Ian Santa Maria.
Ian Santa Maria, okay.
I was working for DDB Philippines at the time, and now I work
DDB?
for DDB, Doyle, Dane, and Burnback.
Oh, I don't know them, okay.
Yeah. But now I work for Harrison Communications. So he really, from then on, I was brainstorming almost all of my free time. What's the thing that I want to write about?
Yeah. So tell us about this now, Filipinos Heroes League, the idea, the concept, and the purpose behind putting this out. Like, what happens here? Where do they come from? Where do they go?
Sure.
Okay. FHL?
FHL,
Yeah.
right.
Can you zoom in on this a bit? Yeah. Oh, here we go. There we go. Zoom in. Here we go. InSights, black and white. This could be in color too, right?
Not
expensive.
as of yet. It's really expensive. It's too
Okay.
expensive to put in color.
All right, here we go. Filipinos Hero Leagues, and that's Invisiboy, the main hero, in a pedicab with Kidlet Kid. Yeah, they're the superheroes. So go ahead, tell us about this.
Well, what I wanted to do, I guess it's a lot like Watchmen in that sense.
Yeah.
I wanted to write a superhero comic book, but I wanted to write a Filipino superhero comic book, and I wanted to put them in a context wherein it would be acceptable, because even me, there were a lot of Filipino heroes, superheroes about in Filipino literature, but for me, you need to put them in a context for it to be acceptable to a Filipino audience. And what I stumbled upon was I asked myself the question: what if the entire world were populated by superheroes? So you had French superheroes, you had Russian superheroes, you had American superheroes.
Yeah.
And so I asked the question: if there were Filipino superheroes in that world context, how would the world treat Filipino superheroes?
How would they?
And then it dawned on me that, well, they'd still be third world superheroes. You know,
it's kind of sad, though.
it's kind of sad, but then it suddenly you could accept them as such. Suddenly you had a political structure that mirrored
actually
our
like
world.
the heroes, the real life heroes of the Philippines, like the guy who pushes the library. What's his name? I keep forgetting his name. The guy from Cavite, the library boy.
I can't remember his name,
Okay,
but I know him. He's my friend on Facebook. Efren. Peña Florida.
Peña Florida. That's
Thank
correct.
you. And so, yeah. So when I stumbled on that phrase, third world superheroes, the world kind of made sense to me, and I could create a world wherein a lot of the Filipino superheroes left the Philippines and went abroad and started finding for greener pastures abroad. Because there was overseas Filipino superheroes. You know, that's the world that I had created.
Paulo, now tell us a bit about the process of writing, the process of imagining, putting it together, and structuring a story. Because it's probably one story, and maybe it's a complex story. So how do you go about it? Like, do you put out whiteboards all across your room and think them through, think through the characters, the plot, the setting? How do you go about that? How did you go about this one to be? specific,
Yeah, this one in particular took, it was, the heavy lifting took about 3 months, a heavy mental lifting.
Yeah.
In that,
prior to putting anything on paper.
yeah.
Okay.
So there was a lot of brainstorming by yourself to try to
alone. No companion, nobody to bounce off ideas from. Okay.
At most, I had my wife. You know, when
Right.
I'd share an idea, then she'd say, "Well, that sounds interesting," or something like that. And then, for the most part, then I'd then try to, once I built the world, you just kind of ran with the characters, and you started building. You have your thesis statement, you have your idea of what you want to say with this world. From there, you start building your characters and your plot and all of that.
3 months of heavy
3
duty
months,
thinking.
Yeah.
Prior to putting it on paper. Okay. And then after that?
Then after that, then comes the nitty-gritty, tiny little details. You know, because what I did initially was, for me, Filipino Heroes League is a 3-part. Actually, for me, it's 1 book separated into 3 parts.
Okay.
So this is book 1, and then book 2 is already in the works, and then the story will end in book 3. So I plotted out, I worked out all of the major events that's going to be happening in the entire novel, which is the reason why I think at the end of book 1, you'll stumble upon this gigantic conspiracy. Because that's
Tell us about it.
Yeah, and that's about it. You say, oh, there's a conspiracy, and that's all I'll tell you.
So the characters in this, how close are they to real life? And the setting, how close is it to real life? And where do you pick up the ideas from? Where do you build the first character from? The Invisiboy, which looks like you, by the way.
That's just coincidence.
That's a coincidence. Okay, he's bald. So how do you go? I mean, do you take a character and then convert them into a graphic personality? Or how does the process go? For people who might want to write the next book or the next fiction.
Well, for me, with my discipline in advertising, nothing comes out of, I don't write anything without a solid idea. So Invisiboy, although he's a very real character to me, he also represents he's kind of a statement of what I'm trying to say about every man in the Philippines. And I think his power kind of connotes that as well. And
I would like to ask you what is that statement, but go ahead, finish describing the process.
Okay.
I'll go and ask you what is that statement about.
And so every single character, even your plot, and even your design, and even your small little gadgets or what the kind of things that they use, all stem from that kind of. Well, for me, the solid idea was third world superheroes. You know, why are they third world superheroes? So if they're third world superheroes, they don't have fancy equipment. They have a pedicab, you know. They don't have great costumes. They have
laser
rags.
guns.
They don't have laser guns, exactly.
Yeah.
And so you have to make do, the way Filipinos do every day.
Okay. So what is that statement about relating to the ordinary Filipino on the street? How does he represent the man on the street? By what element of him?
Let's see.
Let's take the question to a bigger level, no? What are you trying to put across? What are you trying to inspire the audience with? You are saying something through this, through the graphic representation of your thoughts and your ideas. And what are you trying to put across? What change are you trying to bring about?
Well, the thing is, I guess one of the... It's
the thesis,
Yeah, the thesis, the thing that's there in the back is that, I think I put it there in the quote, it's tough being a superhero, but it's even tougher being a third world superhero.
Thus,
the truth of the matter is that life in the Philippines is really difficult.
Challenging,
you know, it's extremely challenging for, I think all of us find it challenging to a certain degree. There's lots of different external pressures that are making life difficult. There's corruption, there's a lack of discipline and all of that. But behind all that, even though it is hard, I think the Philippines as a country is still worth fighting for.
Whoa, you sound like Ninoy.
there's a very deep nationalistic current through the book.
Well, it should be, because it says Filipinos Heroes League. It doesn't say Filipinos Suckers League. You know?
Right. Yeah. So, but I hope though, even though there is that very serious heart to the story, I hope that when people read it, they just have fun with it. I mean,
initially,
on a very
subtle level, you need that strength coming through.
A little bit, yeah.
Right.
I wanted to. I didn't want it to be fluff. I wanted it to hit something still, but I didn't want it to be so broodingly serious. It's a comic book.
It's a comic book. Now, the process of after you have it on your computer, you've done the work, you've done these sketches. By the way, they are fantastic. I kid you not. I wish I had the talent. But after you do this, where do you take this? Who edits this for you? and who puts it all together, and how do you bring it out to the market?
Well, there was for me a two-stage process.
Okay.
Well, sorry, or maybe a three-stage process now. First, I would tell the story to my wife, or I would finish the story and make her read it. It was very important because she's not a comic book reader.
And this is all sketched out on the screens of your computer.
Yes, yeah.
Nothing, paper or pencil, no script.
No,
no text.
No text. No, I'd print it out. For her
hard
to read.
copies. All
yeah,
right.
hard copy. But it's just for her, so she'd read through it, and then she would tell me what she didn't understand. And it's important because she's not a graphic novel reader.
Yeah, you need the person who doesn't come from the field. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So she has this very, raw
objective
vision, a
yeah,
very
yeah.
objective thing. It's like, oh, I don't understand this. I don't understand this, and there's that kind of clarification. And then I take it to my editor, who's Budget Tan, and he's kind of been
Budget Tan?
Budget Tan is one of the gods of the local Filipino comic industry.
Vistaprint. Is it Vistaprint?
Actually, he is both. Visprint is our publisher. Visprint is our publisher. And so he helped guide me in telling the story, and he helped introduce me to Visprint, in fact, who was his publisher. And luckily, I was just very lucky. So I sent the manuscript, or just, I cheated. They said that to give the manuscript to them, just give them a sample, but make sure that the entire book is finished before you send the sample. The book wasn't finished yet, but I was so excited that I sent them a sample of the work.
Right.
And I said, are you interested in seeing the rest? And they said, yes, we're interested. And that's why I spent the rest of the time trying to finish the book.
So where was the cheating? You hadn't finished yet?
I hadn't finished the book.
Okay. The process should have been that you should have finished it before offering it to them.
Yes.
Then what happens post that? Now, when it goes into print, how do you take it to market, and how's it doing in the market today?
Well, after that, the thing is, Visprint, or the way it works in publishing, is that they handle all the printing, they handle all the distribution, and they handle managing all the collecting from bookstores, and I just get a royalty. And so they're the ones that manage that. So when it hit the bookstores, without much
flair
or anything like that, I think I got into I think I was number 8 in the National Bookstore bestseller list.
In comics?
No, in Philippine publications.
In last year?
This year. So for the month of April.
Is that runs across all kinds of, all genres of books?
All genres of Philippine publications, yeah. So it reached number 8.
So you didn't have to do any personal marketing, you didn't have to go and sell it to schools or do talks in bookstores, nothing?
It worked through word of mouth, and I was very lucky. In fact, there's a great event called Comic Con, and I had launched it in Comic Con, I think a month before it had reached the bookstores. And it had created quite a lot of buzz in Comic Con, and then I think it kind of radiated to the bookstores. So there's a ready market willing to pick up the book, and I was very, very lucky.
I'd like to ask you, probably we are coming to the end of this show, we got 3 to 5 minutes now. I'd like to give you tips to future hopeful writers or graphic novelists. Hold that, but give us a little picture of the industry, the animation industry, the graphic, print media industry. What's your view of that? How is it in the Philippines?
Well, right now it is incredibly exciting because it's growing. Every year it's growing. There are more and more enthusiasts. There are comic book enthusiasts that didn't know that there was a local industry. And
or there was a market for it.
Or that there was a market for it. Yeah. So there's a lot of fans of foreign graphic novels. And then slowly they're discovering the local scene, which is incredibly exciting. And I think to aid that, my friends and I had also created since there are 23 million, so there's an event like Comic Con, which is a growing event every year.
Yeah. What's 23 million?
And what we have just done, my friends and I, we've created a Facebook application to read comic books. It's called Comic Strips. So
23 million people who like it?
No, what I'm saying is that there are 23 million Filipinos now on Facebook. And so what we want to do is, like, since there are 23 million people on Facebook, we want to bring our comics to them. That's why we've created this app, and so far it's also doing.
So how many other guys are there like you, girls and guys like you?
There's thousands.
Thousands of them. Yeah. So how many comic books are there, besides the usual heroes like Darna and Captain Kidlet and Barbell and stuff?
There's a ton of them.
There's brand new ones? You have brand new ones?
Brand new ones. If you come April, hopefully you can come. In April there's going to be another.
Please, yeah.
Come April, Comic Con.
Where does that happen? SMX?
It's going to be happening in, I think probably the Bayanihan Center in Pioneer in April, in summertime.
Okay.
It's nearby Unilab. And anyway, So there's a gigantic event filled with comic book enthusiasts, creators, and fans, and every year it's growing, and it's quite exciting.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, your tips to upcoming hopeful writers and graphic novelists or graphic writers. What are your tips for them?
Well, my tips, I think, for them is just come up with a solid idea. Come up with an idea that nobody else has thought about, or it's not yet out there, and then base your comic book on that, and then just continue writing. Write.
How about persistence, resources,
that's all part
relationships, kilala kita? How about those? How about knowing, having people in the know? Nothing, no?
There's a little bit of that. You
Yeah.
know, there's a little bit of that. But the thing is, if you really like comic books, I think that just happens naturally. You want to gravitate towards people who have been successful, and you want to ask their advice. So for me, I think because for me, writing, especially graphic noveling, is a very lonely business. A lot of the time you're alone, you're by yourself. So it's that persistence of being alone and being by yourself and just going at it that's really important.
So where do you find your drive when you sit alone and do this? How does it fulfill you, and what keeps you driven? You just said that it's a challenging thing, you gotta sit alone. How does it fulfill you?
For me, it's just something that I love.
It's an expression.
Yeah, it's something that I guess I've always been drawn to the arts.
Right.
You know, and if you find that thing that you love, there's nothing that's going to stop you from doing it. Nothing. And that's, for me, that's what it is.
Mr. Fabregas, thank you very much for being on ExPat InSights.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with your graphic novel.
Thank you.
And if you want to invite our audiences to your website and tell them a bit about the 2 upcoming books of this.
Sure.
This is your moment. 2 minutes up there.
Okay, great. Please visit me on Facebook. You'll find me on facebook.com/Filipino Heroes League. You can also read me on Facebook. That's on apps.facebook.com/comicstrips with an X and then TRIPS. And that's where you see me.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Paulo Fabregas of Filipinos Heroes League, the author and the artist. And our next guest is a storyteller. She is not a person who writes, but who expresses herself on stage. And stay watching, and we'll come back to you after this break. I'm your host, Raju, and this is ExPat InSights.